Hello everybody and welcome to yet another video on the Warlock specific guide to each encounter in Blackrock Foundry on normal and heroic difficulty. As always, this is Draven Rennick from the US Sargeras server, bringing you some recommendations for Blackhand. Today's spec will be Demonology. This guide aims to cover the talents, both offensive and defensive, the glyphs, both offensive and defensive, useful add-ons, Warlock specific tips as they relate to the mechanics, the opener, general DPS knowledge, the final 25% of the fight, and Warlock specific tips to boost your DPS. If you'd like to skip to any particular portion of the video, feel free to click on any of the annotations you see on the screen now. With that said, let's get started. Let's take a look at talents. As far as offensive talents go, for this fight, there's really only one true choice to be competitive DPS, Demonic Servitude with Grimoire of Service. As such, you should look to take Grimoire of Service, Archimonde's Darkness, and Demonic Servitude. As far as defensive talents go, this is one of those fights that could really go either way. You could opt in for the on-use cooldowns, if you tend to accidentally get hit by Marked for Death or any of the environmental threats, or take the passive 30% damage mitigation if you feel quite confident that you can dodge these threats and quickly line of sight the Marked for Death. That said, if you're not entirely comfortable with the fight, or confident you can quickly avoid the environmental hazards, then you should take Soul Leech and Sacrificial Pact, leaving Unending Resolve available as a damage mitigation cooldown. However, if you're confident you can dodge all the environmental hazards, then you should take Soul Leech and Soul Link, with the Glyph of Eternal Resolve for a total 30% passive damage mitigation. Let's move on to glyphs. Outside of possibly using Eternal Resolve for passive damage mitigation, there's really no reason to swap out glyphs here. I recommend the standard. Glyph of Life Tap to keep as little stress on your healers as possible, Glyph of Hellstone since there's really no large spikes in damage in this fight, and Glyph of Unending Resolve. Now, a note on Glyph of Hellstone. If you tend to find that your healers are unable to keep you alive during the transition phases, you can unglyph this and use a healing tonic instead. In its place, you may want to consider Siphon Life. Moving on to useful add-ons. For this fight there really are none. Outside of weak auras for tracking various procs, buffs, and debuffs, there's nothing so vital that you just have to have it. That brings us to Warlock specific tips as they relate to the mechanics. Use your Warlock portal to get away from the demolitions in Phase 1, as well as to avoid being thrown from the platform in Phase 3 when you help soak the Shattering Smash. Make good use of Demonic Leap to position yourself either behind the debris pile in Phase 1 or behind the Siegemaker in Phase 2 for Marked for Death. Additionally, you can do some pretty nifty things with Demonic Leap during Phase 3 to avoid potentially going off the edge. Let's take a look at your opener. You should be using Demonic Servitude, so do the following. Begin by pre-potting and pre-casting Soulfire at the boss when your group's countdown gets to 5 seconds. The timing on this cast is actually the most important factor in a solid opener. Because of the nature of the present trinkets, if you can get a full cast off and in the air before the boss is pulled, then what you'll see is that your trinket and ring will proc a second time immediately after they expire initially. Follow that cast up with a Shadow Bolt, since you technically shouldn't be in combat yet, since your Soulfire is traveling through the air. Once that goes off, you'll be in combat, so use all your cooldowns, Dark Soul, Summon Doomguard, any on-use trinkets, racials, etc. You can macro these all together for convenience. And then begin your standard opener. That would mean use Hand to Gul'dan, followed by Corruption, 2 Shadow Bolts, 3 if your group used Heroism or Bloodlust, Hand to Gul'dan, Metaform, Chaos Wave, if you have the 4-piece tier 17 bonus, and Doom. Burn any and all available Demonic Fury on Soulfire, Chaos Wave, or Touch of Chaos in that order. This brings us to general DPS knowledge. Since you are likely using Double Servitude, the biggest DPS boost you'll have is pulling your Molten Core procs for when you have Dark Soul available. If you notice that you're going to cap your Demonic Fury, or your Molten Core procs, just make sure to jump into meta and dump some of your Fury on either excess Molten Core procs if you've got more than 6 or 7, or on Touch of Chaos. Additionally, make sure you maintain your Doom and Corruption on the boss at all times. In Phase 2, make sure you dot up any and all Siege Makers with both Corruption and Doom. Make sure you maintain these dots on both the available siege and the boss throughout the duration of that phase. Additionally, depending on your group's strategy, make sure you help burn the Siege Maker when it gets below 25% health, especially if someone missed their mark for death line of sight. If you've been tasked with going into the stands, make sure you use demonic lead without the falling meteor glyph during the transition phase. Additionally, make sure you've got 3 chaos waves available. Now we can look at the final 25% of the fight. The final 25% of the fight becomes very straightforward. Spam Soulfire continuously. Make sure you use your second potion and your Doomguard for this part of the fight. If you won't have Dark Soul active for the remainder of the fight, then try to line your second potion up with your strongest DPS procs. Continue to follow the mechanics and run the bombs and mark for death to their designated spot. Make sure you help stack to alleviate the pressure on your tank for the shattering smash. Lastly, we look at Warlock specific tips to boost your DPS. There's not really a whole lot you can do in this fight to pad the meters and look good. My biggest piece of advice is to stay alive. Dead DPS is no DPS, and there are certainly a number of things in this fight that can kill you rather quickly. With that said, you can ensure that you keep the boss and the Siege Maker fully dotted the entire time during Phase 2 to squeeze out a bit of extra damage. Well, that concludes this guide to normal heroic Blackhand. Thanks for watching. If there's a particular fight in BRF that you'd like to see next, let me know by leaving a comment below. I'll see you all in the next video.